Good afternoon, everyone. Overnight, an intense storm inundated Port Augusta with over 59 millimetres of rain in a 3-hour period, with hundreds of call-outs to the emergency service, including a number of swiftwater rescues for people that are caught in flash flooding. Further north, Ernabella across the APY lands was hardest hit with over 106 millimetres of rain. And what that's led to is quite a large number of outback roads becoming impassable. The Stewart Highway remains closed at Glendambo with water 400 mil deep over the pavement, and we expect it to be at least 12 days until the water has subsided and restoration works can commence. Engineering options are being explored to accelerate this time frame by draining or pumping the water, and that's been examined through the Department of Infrastructure and Transport. Rail damage to the east of Tarcoola is being restored by ARTC, and our current estimates are that the repairs to the track will be complete by the 17th of February. The overnight rains have not impacted their current operations. The Air Force has been able to deliver 20 tonnes of emergency supplies to Coober Pedy. That's all gone smoothly, and the last of the flights will be late today. It's been a well-executed and collaborative effort for all involved, and I'm very grateful for the help and support of the Australian Defence Force. Outback areas north of Port Augusta are sodden, and we're expecting further heavy rains throughout the day, particularly in the northern parts of the northeast pastoral and northwest pastoral districts. Many roads are closed, impassable or dangerous. Please stay away. Or if you're in these locations, stay put and rethink non-essential travel. I'm going to hand over to the Bureau just for a bit of an update on the outlook.
Good afternoon. So we continue to monitor this very heavy rain and storm event as it progresses across the far north of our state. In the last 24 hours, we've seen some significant rainfall totals, including the 106 millimetres at Ernabella. We've also seen 87 millimetres at Tyone, 75 millimetres at Todmorden, and 53 millimetres at Ernabella. So some very heavy rainfall. Through the remainder of today, we still have that severe weather warning current, and that band will progress across the far north of our state before clearing the far northeast as we move through the early part of Wednesday. So further falls in the 50 to 80 millimetre range are possible, and maybe even higher falls with thunderstorms. Further south, as was mentioned, Port Augusta copped a very intense thunderstorm yesterday evening around 8 p.m. We actually saw 50 millimetres of rain in just 50 minutes, so there's some quite intense rainfall rates up above that 1 in 100 year event for Port Augusta. So over the coming days, we'll see a return to more of a typical summertime pattern with a high pressure system maintaining fine weather right across South Australia after the rain clears. But it will take some time for this water to flow down through these inland watercourses, infiltrate and evaporate. So we may need generalised flood warnings to continue for some of the larger inland river systems, including the Cooper Creek, where there's already a generalised flood warning in place. And that may be extended to the Warburton River as well. So it may be some time before we see that water gradually dissipate through some of these inland areas. Got questions?
How serious? To describe how serious this is for residents up there.
Yeah, look, it's certainly a very significant event for our state. So if we look at the event as a whole, I mean, it's always hard to classify each event of heavy rain through the inland parts, but as the event of a whole, we probably only see something like this once every 2 or 3 decades. So I believe back in 1989 there was a very similar event, and maybe have to go back much further than that.
There's been some heavy rainfalls at Pukaja up in the APY. Do you have any readings for that locale?
Yes, so Ernabella Pukaja received 106 millimetres in the 24 hours to 9 a.m. this morning. They also had some rainfall prior to that, so up to around 120, 130 millimetres for the event today.
Would you say this is going to get worse?
No, the event as a whole will ease in the coming days as that rain band clears, but through those far northern areas, it just remains to be seen how much rain they get today. and what some of those larger river systems near the Northern Territory border look like. And we'll get some good intel once the cloud and rain clears and we get some satellite images just showing how much water's out there.
When was the last time Annabella had this much rain?
Look, Annabella had quite a large amount of rain with the last system that went through just over a week ago now, but I don't have exactly how much it had. Certainly the far northwest of our state is more prone to these heavy tropical downpours, and it's not uncommon to see 50 or 100 millimetres through that area.
Are you aware of what's causing this type of weather event up there?
Yeah, so look, we've seen a lot of moisture right across the north of the continent, spilling into South Australia. It started with ex-tropical cyclone Tiffany, which came in from the north. Since then, we've seen another tropical low form up near the north of WA, up around the Broome area. And we've just seen that rain and storms and moisture feed in from that low across the north of our state.
And you were
Can I
expecting...
just ask Mr. Beatty a question about the circumstances up in AQY and kind of sit rep about the infrastructure around Annabella and Crookager and how bad it might be up there?
Yeah, there's been a lot of rain across that part of the state, and the advice we've had from SAPOL is that all the outback roads across APY at the moment are impassable.
And the townships, have any sit rep on how they're faring?
Look, at this stage we don't have any reports of significant damage, and we're just encouraging people to stay put until those roads become safer.
What about the airports? I know there's a few people up there with COVID at the moment. Are there any provisions that people are needing to get to hospital at the moment?
Yeah, certainly SA Health are dealing with a number of COVID patients and repatriations. This particular weather system is causing some challenge to that, but we're working through which aerodromes are open, and SA Health will be progressing the repatriation of COVID patients as the weather permits.
How many call-outs have you had in the far north?
Look, in the far north, the number of call-outs is relatively low in terms of calls to our 000 132 500. In general, those communities are highly resilient. Most of our call-outs last night resulted from the very severe storm in Port Augusta, where we saw hundreds of calls for help to the 000 line, the 132 500 line, and a number of swiftwater rescues needed to be undertaken to save people from flash floodwaters.
Have you been noticing that people are driving through floodwaters? We've seen some vision overnight. People are still trying. What's your message to them?
Look, it's really disappointing to see that some members of the community are just not heeding the message. Driving through floodwaters can be one of the most dangerous things anybody can do in a severe weather event. It's the leading cause of death for flooding. So I just encourage people to drive to the conditions, obey the road signs, and do not drive through floodwaters.
Any indication yet if you might need to send support crews up to Hoover or Port Augusta?
Yeah, so earlier in the week we pre-staged a number of crews out of Adelaide into the north. We sent a team of SES first responders by air to Coober Pedy, and we've had swiftwater crews with rotary wing support staging out of Port Augusta. That decision proved to be very useful last night with that flash flooding and severe weather damage across Port Augusta.
And these were people stranded in cars and the like?
Yeah, that's correct. There were 4 people rescued from cars that they came unstuck in the floodwaters.
With more rain expected from here on in, what are the next steps?
The next steps really are to encourage the community to stay safe, to stay put if they're in those locations, and not to visit the area.
But what will you be doing? Sorry, any plans over the next few days?
Across the whole emergency service sector, there's a whole range of activities that have been undertaken. We're very focused on getting the roads reopened, particularly the Stewart Highway, and we're supporting ARTC with anything it needs to accelerate the restoration of the rail.
Just in relation to Port Augusta, I think I counted 80 call-outs in under an hour last night. Just how much pressure did that put on your service? Just describe how you handled it.
Well, there was a tremendous effort from right across the emergency services, police, SES volunteers, CFS volunteers, and metropolitan firefighters that were all employed in responding to the community from that event. We don't have large numbers of response crews in that area, so having the extra resources from Adelaide certainly helped.
What are the plans to get supplies to the community at Oodnadatta and County of?
So we have a far north zone emergency support team that's staged out of Port Augusta. That team is led by police and has representatives from the emergency services and local councils. And through that team, we're maintaining close contact with all those remote and isolated communities. At this stage, the Zone Emergency Support Team is satisfied that those communities have sufficient food supplies, acknowledging that they are short on for fresh food, veggies and meat. But there's plenty of dry stock, there's plenty of tinned and frozen, and so at this stage we're quite comfortable with the food supplies for most of those communities. Having said that, as this event protracts and the roads remain closed for longer periods, we will be needing to look at resupplies potentially in some areas.
On the take-away scenario, are comms still available out of that zone, or are you sort of down to that level of information?
No, there's good communications from out of that zone. Over the last 48 hours we did have some communications interruptions on Eyre Peninsula, but they've largely been resolved now.
How long can you expect to be transporting food out to these regional communities?
Look, we're working hard to get the Stewart Highway reinstated. We're also looking at freight routes in from Northern Territory, and certainly those routes are open. We have a resupply of diesel coming into Coober Pedy from Darwin in the next day. We are also working with Metcash on opportunities to resupply Coober Pedy via Alice Springs.
Do you have an idea of what the estimated damage was for that part of the region?
The state has established a recovery working group. We're starting to aggregate data from local councils, from state agencies, but at this stage it's way too early to put a figure on the damage group.
So the road repairs to the 17th of February, is that one stretch of line or each damaged area to be repaired by that date?
Look, there are 18 areas where there's been significant damage to that rail, and that damage has caused a disruption to all rail traffic to Darwin and all rail traffic to West Australia. ARTC have commenced restoration work at both ends, and at this stage it's progressing well. They've assembled the contractors, the heavy plant and equipment and the materials they need to get the job done. They'll have a better idea towards the end of the week as to whether that 17th of February target is going to be met, or indeed if they're progressing well they may be able to bring it forward. But at this stage they're working towards the 17th.
In terms of sending supplies via flight, are you suggesting we won't see any more of that from the ADF in the coming days?
Look, it's a bit too early to say. At this stage we are working closely with a number of partners on an alternative route to deliver road freight into the north of the state to bypass the current stretch of Stewart Highway where we've got the inundation. It's unclear as to whether that's going to be feasible, but we've certainly got people looking at that, and we've got Defence examining options with regard to some of the roads within the Woomera prohibited area.
How many volunteers or staff do you have from Adelaide SES in Port Augusta?
Look, I couldn't put an exact figure on it. We've got quite a number of crews that have staged throughout the north. There would have been at least 20 additional first responders in Port Augusta last night.
Commissioner, can I ask you a question? Just wondering if there's any update on the search for Christopher Taylor.
The search is still ongoing, and obviously it's been going for quite a period of time. There's many resources are being put towards the search. We have looked at many options. We probably have to have consideration now as to how much longer the search goes on. But can I just say, SAPOL, in addition to the current COVID-19 response, is coordinating the efforts of various agencies both in the region and back here in Adelaide in terms of the current weather event that we've been discussing this morning. I just want to pay respects and acknowledge that there are a significant number of agencies involved in this response. We have obviously SES, we have DIT, we have engineering, the support of the ADF, which has been mentioned, the RAF, PIRSA, SA Water, Department of Industry and Trade. This is a significant event for the state. Just because it's not happening here in Adelaide doesn't mean that we're not extremely concerned about the communities. The resilience that we've seen in those communities is greatly respected, and we're taking this incident very seriously to support them, not just in the immediate response, but in the relief efforts and in the ongoing recovery efforts, which will play out over the coming months with the damage that's occurred. So I just want to acknowledge that effort, and it will be ongoing.
Very good. Thank you.